Welcome to a very special live episode of Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, August 28th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 3 days, the game against Michigan in 94 days. Yes, it is, in fact, an Ohio State football game week. Had our traditional Tuesday Ryan Day press conference. Got a chance to talk to Ryan Day, Ohio State defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, and new Ohio State starting quarterback Will Howard. Today, joined by Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, I'm sure the first thing people are going to be asking is, what do you think of the Connor Stalions documentary? And the good news is we have safely sequestered that in an entirely different podcast that people can go and find if they want to watch it. Mm-hmm. But we already talked about that.
Yeah, no, we have talked about that. You can find it at the Buckeye Weekly podcast when I actually get a chance to post it later this afternoon. Also, you can find it at the youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle as well. Look in the live tab. You'll see it there. And after you watch this, go ahead and watch that if you haven't already watched it. And if you have, you watch it a second time.
It was a truly magical Buckeye Weekly live show, playing all the hits with entirely new audio disruptions from an entirely new cast of characters.
It's like when Van Halen started playing the classics with the synthesizers.
Yeah, it was definitely a David Lee Roth worthy performance from the guy with the chainsaw and the guy with the forklift dragging a big soccer bench past us. It was
fantastic.
Everything you've come to know and hate from this show, all in one thing. So that's that show. That's the Buckeye Weekly podcast. We're talking Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning, and instead of talking Michigan and Connor Stalions, we are actually talking legitimate, actual Ohio State football, which is happening in just 3 days from the day this podcast is technically dated. It's a long thing. It doesn't matter. We know what day it is. We know that it's a whole gimmick. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're not here to talk about gimmicks. We're here to talk about Ohio State football, and we're here to talk about some of the things we learned talking to Ryan Day a little bit ago. And let's start with, it was the first question of the podcast, or the first question of the interview session. You know, normally it's, Ryan, are you ready to tell us who the starting quarterback is? That question has already been answered. So in this case, it was, Ryan, are you ready to tell us who the starting right guard is?
Yeah, of all places. That's where it went. And Tegra Shabola will get the start. He has earned that. They do expect to roll some guys in there, but he said Tegra has been just consistent throughout, consistently available, and in playing consistently well. So
the best ability is
availability, and that's what he's been. So they're not just we're going to throw you a bone. No, like, he's earned this spot. He will obviously play. He'll start the game, but I would expect Carson Hinsman, if he's good to go, he will also play at times, and they're going to roll some guys in there. You'll see Luke Montgomery at some point. They're just going to get in who they can, and they want to play depth where they can. But you're never going to have a coach tell you, like, well, we want this guy in the second quarter, we want this guy in the third quarter, because it's always, well, you got to see how it goes. They'll talk about it internally when they want to get guys in, and we can talk about the Devin Brown situation when they'd like to get him in. But also, the main point is winning the game. And even talking to Jim Knowles, they're like asked, would 14-0 be enough for you to put in some backups at safety? He's like, nope, still first teamers.
Yeah, if it's 14-0 in the second quarter was sort of the hypothetical got thrown out to him, and he's, nope, they are not taking anything for granted. Yeah. It is Akron, yes. They're not taking anything for granted.
And that's at safety. We're not talking about like defensive line.
Right. Yeah.
There's just a clear delineation at safety.
Yes, and there's also, Ryan Day talked about rolling guys in the offensive line. It's like, well, what does that really mean? Yeah. Does that mean you're going to see Carson Hinsman with the ones on drive 3 of the game, or does that mean that you're going to see the 2s and you might see the 3s during the course of the game? But both of those could be rolling, and it's like, everyone was getting one question, so you don't want to. Ryan, I was going to ask about something else, but when you mean rolling, when you say rolling, what does that actually mean? I assume we may see some Carson Hinsman with the ones, perhaps. I think you might see the second team offensive line at some point late in the first half, possibly at least early in the second half. But we will see what that all means. The next position, before we do get to the backup quarterback spot and the plan there, I did want to talk about the other starting positional battle that was at least sort of open. This is another one where we sort of felt like we got the answer a week ago. We definitely got the answer today. Tony Gerdeman, who is the starting linebacker at the will linebacker position for the 2024 Ohio State Buckeyes?
That will be Sonny Styles. And Ryan Day told us last week that Sonny was the leader in the clubhouse. He's done everything and that they could ask, and he's doing it well. So he will get the start. And we kind of knew that something bad would have had to have happened for Sonny over this past week for him to lose that. It's a very good sign, because that's what he's always been projected as this is the spot that he's maybe always meant to play. And the fact that he has stepped in and knows the defense as he does, is playing well, it's a very good sign. Conceivably, maybe not conceivably, just should be a step up from the play last year and the play they've gotten recently.
And, of course, everyone always wants to know what's going on with Sonny Styles, former 5-star recruit, local player. Everyone loves him. So Sonny Styles is starting. That surely makes everyone happy, except for the people who always ask about C.J. Hicks, who is presumably not starting. He is also someone who, much like in the Carson Hinzman conversation, talked about rolling guys there as well. You're probably going to see, I would bet you see C.J. Hicks in the first half on Saturday, too.
Yeah, for sure. And when Jim Knowles talked about it, he said he considers C.J. Hicks a co-starter. Like, he said he has 3 starters. And then he also said something that is different than what he told me a week or two ago when I asked him if Sonny or C.J. Hicks could play that mic and play together and be that. And when the question was posed in terms of Sonny being able to play that mic today, he had no doubt. Like, he was just like, yes, yeah, he can do that. Like, he's really impressed them with the grasp of everything, and everything they've given to him, he's been able to do. So there could be situations where Cody Simon goes out, and Sonny steps in at Mike, so they can bring C.J. Hicks in. Sonny can play either spot. Cody Simon, we know, can play either spot. So Knowles did then at some point say he envisions the same number of snaps for those 3, maybe this week. We'll see how that goes. That's always easier to say than do in terms of just hitting that sweet spot of the numbers.
Right, and it's also easy to look at things on Tuesday and say, well, certainly they're going to score touchdowns on their first 4 drives and they'll be up 28-0 early in the second quarter, and everything's going to go great and nothing is going to go wrong, and there won't be a bad snap, and there won't be anyone who falls down, and there won't be a missed extra point and whatever else. And then on Saturday, how often do we see week 0, none of the big favorites covered, not a one. And so there's always a little bit of rust, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So we'll see what that all looks like on Saturday. But yes, it is easy to say right now. Let's move on now to the next positional question, which was the backup quarterback spot. We now have officially who is the number 2 quarterback entering week 1 answered. And what is the plan for him, Tony Gerdeman?
Yeah, Devin Brown. And the plan is always to play your backup in games like this, but we've also seen plans where I want to get him in the 3rd series. I want to get him in at this point in the second quarter. Ryan Day said he and Chip Kelly have talked about that, but that is not in the plans right now. They may be part of the plans, but right now they're just going to play until it's time to bring in somebody else. Until Will Howard has gotten his day's work, he's punched his card, and now it's time for Devin Brown. So they're not going to try at this point. They're not going to try to force him in. Because I do think this is always the issue, you bring in the second guy and the momentum from the first guy had is completely out the window, and you've got to rebuild it. So I don't think they want to ruin any kind of momentum, especially this being Will Howard's first real game in the shoe. I don't want to discredit the spring game, but this is going to be a different animal for him. And if he has any momentum, you certainly don't want to stop that. And if he doesn't have momentum, you want him to be able to build it.
All right, we'll get to Will Howard's new job title in a minute. But since you mentioned Will Howard in the spring game, let's talk about Will Howard in the spring game. He talked about, sort of the welcome to Ohio State kind of moments that he has had, where this is not someone who is coming from Slippery Rock, where he's played and it's, three pairs of parents in the stands and someone who got lost on the way down to the Dairy Queen. It is, Kansas State is a big-time college football program, but also it's not Ohio State. And one of the things that really drove that home for Will Howard was going to the spring game at Ohio Stadium this year.
Yeah, I think he still mentioned like the 82,000 in attendance, but I like the fact that he's talking to his teammates before this at some point or in this time frame, and you've got all these transfers coming in and like, what was your spring game like? Will, what was your spring game like? He's like, my spring game was practice 15. There was no spring game. And we've seen that at other places as well, but it's completely different animal at Ohio State. And so something that said he's most looking forward to is just running out of the tunnel to a packed crowd. And I wanted to be like, just so you know, I know the coaches tell you 110,000. By the time you run out of that tunnel, maybe for the last time, when it's actually time to go play with 15 minutes before kickoff or whatever, I'm not expecting 110,000. For one, it's like 5,000 more than they can actually get in there. But also, this is Akron, and it is a season opener. But maybe I'm not giving the fans enough credit that they will be in their seats and ready to go.
It's the season opener, so I'm sure not everyone will have remembered to put their tickets in their Apple Wallet on their phone or whatever. And there's always, the first game hiccups where, everyone has forgotten how to go through the metal detectors or whatever. So, yes, go ahead. If you are attending the game, go ahead and take a moment right now and put your tickets and your parking pass in your Apple Wallet or whatever your Google equivalent of that is.
But first, hit the thumbs up on the video.
Oh, yeah, hit the thumbs up on the video before you do that. Before you waste your time.
Now we've just made somebody forget their tickets.
But then that's your fault because you're the one who I tried.
At least
to
we
help
got as long as we got the thumbs up.
Well, that's all that matters. Well, that's one of the things that matters. One of the other things that was kind of a big conversation was Will Howard's new job title. We knew he was the starting quarterback. Will Howard also the run game coordinator at Ohio State, and that in the past has, I think, I'm going to put this as gently as possible, been one of those phony baloney job title things that they give you. Oh, you're the run game coordinator. You're the passing game coordinator. You're the Gatorade coordinator that you put on someone. And it's like, well, now it's a new job, so now we have to give them a raise. This, and though, that is not normally something that is that's normally a coaching job, not a quarterback job. So what does it mean that Will Howard is now the run game coordinator for Ohio State?
Yeah, and as Ryan Day said, well, there are just so many decisions and choices made with each play. And that's before the snap, that's after the snap. And like Ryan Day said, rarely do they just give them one play and that's it. Like, here, go run this and then do it. Because plays will have, I think, as Will Howard said, a run play can go in three different directions. Just depending on whether he holds it, whether he hand it off in which direction you want it to go. But like that kind of decision making, you are coordinating where the ball is going to go based on what the defense does. You're going to want to make the right reads, but you are the one, as Will Howard said, I'm the guy with the chalk. I have the chalk last. So he does the ultimate decision-making there in the diagramming. So that's where that comes in. But yeah, every play will have three different options. You've got,
can you tell which beloved member of the Ohio State beat is near us?
I am so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm so sorry. My name's Tim May, and I'm sorry. I didn't realize y'all were standing there.
Hey, before you go, I just got 3 quickies.
Even though y'all are learning people,
Always great to have a guest shot from the great Tim May. Oh, thank you. We'll sure see you again on Saturday. Now I've completely derailed everything. Sorry.
Well, that should have been that's the mowing version of Buckeyes TomOrrow Morning. Is Tim May.
There you go.
The run game coordinator, just
Yes.
a bunch of different, not a bunch, like 2 to 3 options on every single play, and he has to make sure that he is getting them out of bad plays. Probably most importantly, making sure no bad plays happen, and then making the correct decision pre-snap and then post-snap in terms of reading that defensive end. Where if the defensive end is crashing down, I'm going to give it to the running back, or whichever the decision is in there. So just the different options, and he's handled all of that well according to Ryan Day. But as we know, the game is always the ultimate tell in all of this.
Yeah, and Ryan Day got a chance to see Tim, who recent podcast guest Tim May, asked Ryan Day a couple things. One of them was whether he had watched the Connor Science documentary. That was part one of a 3-part question, and Ryan Day's exact quote was "No." Period. And then what was the next part of the question? And it was moved on with that.
It was a 3-part question. The first part was the Netflix thing, and then there was like a full minute of asking the next 2 questions. And then so when it was time for Ryan Day to answer, the first thing he says is no. And then what was the second question?
Yeah, it was interesting. That was something he did not watch. And he also did not apparently watch the Florida State game over the last weekend. That was a topic that, hey, number 10 got upset. Is that something you're using to sort of, remind your team, hey, you got to take things seriously? He did not watch the Florida State game. I thought that was interesting on the last weekend before. He's probably got other stuff. He's also got other stuff to do.
Like, this is the last Saturday that he's going to be free for a while. So,
and he was also asked
skating
about
rink or something.
He was also that's only something that I do. I'm at skating rinks this time of year plenty, and I can assure you there are not that many other people there this time of year. Another thing that was he was asked about had he used the fact that Akron beat Ohio State 130 years ago as motivation. Also a no there. A lot of short but very telling answers from Ryan Day today, I guess.
What is telling about that, Tom, that he does not respect the rivalry?
I mean,
like
I think
could not be more put off by you mentioning this. Like, how dare you, sir?
Speaking of teams that play, some play each other sometimes, but would not traditionally be considered a rivalry. Will Howard talked about the fact that he grew up in Big Ten country.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up, I think he said, sadly or unfortunately or something like that, as a Penn State fan. Now said he is on the bright side of that.
Which is that a Michigan thing too?
Mr. Brightside is, but please, Mr. Brightside is my father. Call me the Killers. Let's see, what else? Do we have any other notable things? I always title these shows something like, 5 things we learned from Ryan Day. We have hit the 5 things that I had in my head to ask about that we learned from Ryan Day. Was there anything else that you had that really stood out before we get into questions from the viewers?
I did like Jim Knowles, and he's talked about this before, the interview process with Caleb Downs, recruiting Caleb Downs and treating it like you have to be ultra prepared for this. This isn't something where you're lobster tails and things like that. This is
not a Willie Williams interviews process.
No, we're gonna show you this defense, and he equated it to when he interviewed with
Mike Gundy.
With Mike Gundy for the Oklahoma State job, where he flies in, sits down for 3 hours. He's got 10 people around him. He's showing them what he'd do with the defense and this serious interview process. Never see campus. Then they fly back out. They flew from Columbus, obviously, to Georgia to talk with Caleb Downs. 3 hours, got the laptop out, showed him everything that they had planned for him in this defense, and then he flew back out. And just very boom, boom, boom. And then I did ask him, he said that's like a game day. I'm like, so were you aggressive that day, or was it bend but don't break? And no, it was very aggressive in terms of, this is what we've got planned for you. This is how we see you. And clearly it didn't hurt.
Didn't hurt. Yeah, they won that game. So that is something that I'm sure they're quite happy about.
I also like the discussion of the defense. Ohio State could have won the Cotton Bowl last year if the defense doesn't give up any points. That was a Jim Knowles thing.
Which is technically true, yes. They could have won 3-0 and turned into one of those
classics.
Yes, that was the word I was kind of groping for there. I was like, what's a synonym for classics that means bad and just old? And it's a classic, like
Grandpa.
It's like listen, we're not getting here in the middle of family dynamics on this show, sir. It's like the like when I was growing up, my parents had probably like a 1983 Buick Skylark. It's like, is that a classic? Like, well, it's old. Mm-hmm. This is, that game, if they had won 3-0, would have been the 1983, the Cotton Bowl presented by the 1983 Buick Skylark. Kevin, do we have any questions?
We do. Aaron Taylor, is Howard going to play out of the gun, and have there been any issues with low snaps?
So is Will Howard going to play out of the shotgun, and have there been any issues with low snaps?
Well, they're going to be out of the gun. They're going to be under center too, because they've been doing that a couple of years. No major issues, no ongoing issues with the snaps. Like, that's not anything that has been discussed. And when we saw plenty of practices, and it was not an issue through any of that.
Right. And if there's one at some point, do not immediately crack each other's heads open and feast on the goo inside. That like, you're going to have a bad snap occasionally. If that was an ongoing problem, they have other guys on the roster. Carson Hinsman was literally the starting center last year. If that was an ongoing problem, they have other options. The fact that Seth McLaughlin has been pretty much clear-cut the starting center for the entirety of fall camp tells me that is not something they're concerned about. So don't go looking for something to worry about going into the game. And if it happens once, don't immediately try and make it a bigger deal than it is.
Yeah, I mean, it happens.
Yeah, it is not something that is unique to one person. That happens all the time in college football. Next up.
Rick S. Who starts at left guard if Donovan Jackson is held out?
Well, and that's an interesting thing, because who starts at left guard if Donovan Jackson is held out? Donovan Jackson, we talked with him last week, but he would not. Like, somebody asked him, are you going to be good to go? He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, and it never got brought up today. Mm-hmm. But if he doesn't go, Austin Siereveld has been playing both guard and tackle. I wonder if he's been playing too much tackle to be the next guard in. So it would just be Carson Hinsman, I assume.
Well, that the question is.
But how much
is
left?
It? I know who the backup left guard is. It's Austin Siereveld. Do they go with the backup left guard, or do they go with the third guard, which is probably Carson Hinsman? And we'll all find out together on Saturday. But
I do think they're better equipped to handle the third guard this year than they were last year.
Oh, by 100 million miles, yes. They're better equipped at pretty much every position on the offensive line right now than they were a year ago.
Yeah.
Next up,
Roger Smith. What are you guys expecting in terms of improvement from the Akron game to Michigan from Will Howard?
So what are we expecting in terms of improvement from the Akron game to Michigan from Will Howard? I'm certainly expecting improvement based on the trajectory from this spring until now. The learning curve, he came to Ohio State with a bunch of, I'm going to say institutional knowledge, which is not exactly the right word because it's a different institution now than he was before. But he has just sort of accumulated knowledge, let's say, from being a multi-year starter at Kansas State and having just played a bunch of college football. That's something that NFL teams look at. How many snaps have you played? How many games have you played? How many games have you started? Because that stuff matters. He checks all those boxes. He has certainly learned the Ohio State offense and all the different pieces of the Ohio State offense since then. But I'm certainly expecting him to continue because he made mechanical adjustments over the summer, in addition to picking up all the other kind of more between the ears kinds of pieces of the offense. If he's able to pick all that stuff up, I'm expecting him to continue to improve on a lot of those areas. What does he look like? I guess the question is, what does he look like? How are we grading him for the Akron game? Is it that he completes 65% of his passes against Akron, and even though Michigan's a far better defense, he's in the same realm when he plays Michigan? I don't know what's our grading scale here.
Yeah, well, I think because I asked Brian Day, what do you want to see? Like, what do you want to see from Will? What would be meet the expectations? And he talked just a lot about the operational aspect of things this week, just getting things done on time, getting the right reads. And then I think as you go through the season, you want now that's fine, but now make some plays as well and be one of the best players in the country. But you don't have to I'm going through in terms of the run game coordinator and the decision making. Ryan Day said he needs to be the best in the country at that. And then within the next sentence, he's like, doesn't need to be extraordinary though. That's what he's said, do the routine things routinely. That's what they said about Kyle McCord. You don't need to be extraordinary. Just use the guys around you. But they want him to be the best in the country at running the offense. But, Tom, you don't have to be extraordinary.
Well, and I think that's kind of what we've been saying about Will Howard all season, which is, and not all season, all year. He doesn't have to win the Heisman Trophy for them to win the national championship. He just has to be good, solid, efficient, all the really boring words that coaches love to say that fans go, well, what about? Will he be explosive? Will he be dynamic? Will he be the greatest playmaker? It's like they don't need that. They need him to be solid. There's plenty of other guys around him that are going to be playmakers. One of the things Howard talked about is being open at Ohio State means something different than it did in other places. He was very, very careful, very, very careful to say, listen, I'm not trying to disrespect anyone I've ever played with before. I played with great players, and these are high-level Power 5 guys he played with before. This is not someone who, again, has jumped up from Slippery Rock. But being open at Ohio State means something different than it does in a lot of other places.
Well, and he said a lot of that is because they teach it that way here, and because then they have the athletes to follow through on it. He said, Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, tell him in a one-on-one situation, receivers open. They're going to do something that will throw the ball. They will, whether it's back shoulder or whatever, you put it in a position for them to catch it, and they consider that open. Whereas Kansas State, it's taught a little differently and maybe a little more conservatively, where open means what we would consider open.
Right.
Open just means it's one-on-one, go ahead. Basically that feel free to utilize the 5-star receivers that we have made available to you.
Well, when you think about open, I go back to the 2005 season where Ohio State played Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. And Ted Ginn runs, I don't know if it was a streak or an out and up, but just blast past the corner. I don't know if the corner was sitting on something or whatever. He's 10 yards, 15 yards behind the corner. That's what you think of as, oh boy, that guy's open. Jeremiah Smith only has one guy on him. That's open. That's what, and we have seen that over the course of the spring and even in fall camp when we got to watch. it's not just, oh, this is the mindset. It's like, no, this is actually how it is. If he's even, he's leaving. If the number of people out there for the other team is even with the number of people out there for Ohio State, they are probably going to be leaving.
Well, and think about the social media videos that you've seen, that you guys have seen, showing receivers making catches. You don't see an awful lot of video of them running past a defense open downfield. It's all being fought for, and they're coming up with catches with corners right there with them. So there's not a lot of freedom of movement that you can just wait for him to get open. There's no waiting. And as Will Howard said, it's the same thing in the NFL. Like, the windows are very tiny. The athletes are very good. You give your guy an opportunity to make the catch, because if you're waiting for them to get open, you're going to be waiting forever. You're going to be sacked by then.
Right, and especially against these corners, you're not. How many guys do you think have been running wide open against these corners all fall? Not a whole heck of a lot when we've seen it. Probably not a whole heck of a lot you're going to see over the course of this season. So the windows are small because that's as big as the window gets. If you're waiting for a bigger window, it may never open. So you got to take advantage of what you got. Next up,
Rick S. I went back and watched the OSU spring game. I thought Josh Padilla did a really good job at right guard, even though he's always been projected as a center only. Just a random thought I wanted to post.
So Rick S. thinking that Josh Padilla looked good at right guard during the spring game, even though he's been projected as a center. I will confess that I have not gone back and rewatched the OSU spring game recently, but Josh Padilla is someone who feels like he is sort of in that mix. He's not going to be a starter this year, but he might be in that next group of guys in there. You're probably going to see him at somewhere on Saturday during the second half of the game. They don't need him to be great this year. They just need him to continue to progress. And it sometimes with guys, you hear like, yeah, it's just not happening. Feels like it is happening there. It's a real gradual process with offensive linemen, but it feels like it is happening.
Yeah, Luke Montgomery, Josh Padilla, Austin Searveld, you're hearing them. And I saw Padilla, Josh Padilla at guard in fall camp too, because like they're really, I think, at least last time we saw them, they're trying to make Luke that center, that backup, should they need it. So I wonder if Padilla then next year stays at guard, but then is also the backup at center, because they did recruit him to play center, but the interior is all interchangeable. So but good thought. We'll see what happens there, but he's not been relegated to also.
No, he's someone who's in that conversation, and this is an offensive line that has so many more capable players than they did a year ago or 15 months ago. 15 months ago, it was just shy of outright panic in here over the state of the offensive line. It is absolutely not that right now. It feels like the ones they feel pretty good about, the twos, they're coming along. I don't know how many of those guys would really be classified as game ready right now. Game ready basically means you can throw them in and they're going to start and there's going to be absolutely no drop off. How many of those guys are going to be game ready 12 months from now? Feels like it could be a pretty comfortable number.
Aaron Taylor, will Chip want to run more than Ryan Day has?
Will Chip want to run more than Ryan Day has? Well, Ryan Day is sort of known as a quarterback guru, and Chip Kelly is known as more of a run first kind of guy. His offenses have always been kind of a little more run first. So I'm going to say yes. I think that's probably, and that's what makes them such a good combination, is Ryan Day in the passing game is just so good about scheming that stuff up. Chip Kelly's kind of that way in the run game. We also did find out today where Chip Kelly is going to be during the game.
Yeah, he will be up in the press box. And the last time Chip Kelly was in the press box was as his final year as an offensive coordinator at Oregon. So that was Mike Bellotti's last year as head coach, which I believe was 2008 or so. So it's being presented in a very nice way, because Ryan Day is like, it's going to be clean up there. He's going to have his iPad. He's going to have all of his notebooks. When you're down on the field, it can get a little messy. So he's going to have a nice clean area. It feels like the ideal situation for Chip Kelly, as long as he's happy with it. And you've got Tim Drevno there. You've got Billy Fessler helping him as well. Tony Johnson, Larry Johnson's son, who's part of the staff as well, helping out just with the eyes upstairs. So to me, this feels like the best scenario for Ohio State's offense. And it's a little bit different for Chip Kelly, but it just goes to show you how willing he is, I think, to do whatever is best for the team.
When you talk to football coaches about that, so often they want to be on the sidelines, and this is the hackiest cliche there is, but they want to see the look in their eye. And I'm saying that not because I'm saying that, I'm saying it because that is the exact phrase that they use. They want to look their guys in the eyes. They want to see them. They want to feel them on the sideline. All that being said, there's a reason Jim Knowles is up in the box. Jim Knowles is up in the box because Jim Knowles wants to have the all 22. There's a reason you don't watch when you're breaking down film, you don't break it down from the sideline camera. You break it down from the all 22, which is up high. That gives you a better view. In a year, especially when you're also dealing with the headset coordination, you can be talking to your quarterback the whole time. That way, you don't have to be talking to someone up in the booth who is telling you what they're seeing and then relaying it down to you, and then you're talking to your quarterback. It feels like you're kind of cutting out the middleman a little bit. And with the headset communication piece being new this year, it feels like that might be an particularly impactful reason why he might be headed upstairs, or where he is. Next up.
Terry wants to know, how many quarterbacks play Saturday?
It's funny. I was sitting right behind John Cooper, who comes to all these press conferences during game weeks every year. He's a fixture here, still lives in the area. And he was asking people around him, how many quarterbacks do you think they're going to play on Saturday? The consensus seems to be 3 to 4. I think it's possible they try to play 5. It's possible you try and get, but it's going to depend on how the game's going. I think they're probably going to keep Will Howard in there a little longer than they might otherwise, just to keep, get him established, get him really into the system, get him as many reps as they can. And then you're going to want to play Devin Brown a decent amount. You're not going to want to just give him one drive and move on to the next guy. The other piece of this is, how many drives are they going to get? Because we have seen with some of the clock rules and with the helmet communication and teams huddling more, you're not getting as many plays, you're not getting as many drives as you did last year. So I think I'm going to say 4, but one of them is maybe just for 2 plays at the very end kind of thing.
That's where I would go as well, because I think Will Howard, unless it's like 56-0 at the half, I think he's going to play a series in the third quarter just because they normally do that.
Yeah. So
then you give Devin Brown the rest of the third quarter and maybe a series into the fourth. So now, do you get 2 or 3 possessions in the fourth quarter? Maybe. Because Ohio State's going to be running the clock out too.
Right, and some of that's going to depend on the defense and how quickly does the defense get off the field, and are they getting off the field by forcing a 3 and out, or are they getting off the field by getting a turnover that gives them the ball at the Akron 10-yard line?
If you're paying a team, program, a school $1.8 million to come to town, you should be able to dictate, hey, we'd like you to run at this tempo. We want more snaps. So hurry up, fine. We don't care. We'll take it. We just need some more practice for our offense.
Trenchmaid Rel would like to know, Brandon Ennis, over-under of 7 touchdowns this year.
Brandon Ennis, over-under of 7 touchdowns this year. Brandon Ennis is the number 4 receiver right now, working out of the slot. You figure you're going to see a rotation where he's in there with the 1s too, and maybe they move Ibuka outside, or maybe they give Ibuka a break. 7 touchdowns, that feels high for the 4th receiver, but it's not that hard to get the slot guy on a little slant or something like that. I'm gonna say 7. Can I say push? But 6.5, 7.5. Where are you going?
I would probably go under, just because the 4th quarterback or the 4th receiver. But again, more games than ever before. Right. I do also think I won't be surprised if he gets a couple of carries, jet sweep, that sort of thing. So that'll be maybe that's one of those touchdowns. But I would not go a step above 6, because you just don't see it a lot.
That's a lot. I mean, if you ask people, that doesn't sound like that many touchdowns, but if you ask people how many touchdowns is Jeremiah Smith going to have, and they're all going to say 53, and then how many touchdowns is Carnell Tate going to have, and everyone's going to say, he's not as good as Jeremiah Smith, so it'll only be 35, and then it's they're only going to throw, if they throw 50 touchdowns this year, 55 touchdowns, that would be a ton. How are you breaking that up? And let's also remind people, the running backs are going to have a bunch of receptions this year as well. They're also pretty good. And 50 something touchdowns through the air, that would be a lot. And I'm kind of adjusting for the longer season, 50 would be a lot, though.
And I'm just looking at Jackson Smith and Jigba's sophomore stats because I believe he had 9 touchdown catches that year.
Sounds about right.
So, and he had 90-some catches, 95 catches that year. So it's 7's a lot. Yeah, he had 9 touchdowns. As he finished with 10 in his career.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, he had 9 touchdowns, but 3 of them came in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
So next.
We have RK. After hearing from Coach Knowles today, are you concerned about safety depth?
After hearing from Jim Knowles today, are you concerned about safety depth? I don't think so. I mean, they feel very good about the starters, Latham Ransom and Caleb Downs, and behind them, they've got talent. They've got guys. Malik Hartford, if Caleb Downs was not in Columbus, Malik Hartford is probably your starter, and they're probably feeling pretty okay about that. I mean, where do you think they are in terms of safety depth?
I mean, I don't think anything changed from what Knowles said today to what he said in the past. It's like they're young behind those 2 guys, and it would be Jalen McClain most likely, and Malik Hartford. So yeah, you're talking about a freshman and a sophomore, and Malik Hartford got a couple of starts last year, so that helps. But I don't think it's ideal. That's why they went and brought in Keenan Nelson from South Carolina, and seeing what he can do. They're trying to find depth just like they did with Jihad Carter the year before, and that didn't necessarily work out. So if you lose one of those 2 starting safeties, you can't afford to lose either of those guys just because of what they mean to your defense. You can replace them and somebody might play well, but you're not going to get what you got out of either of those 2.
Right. The ceiling there is very, very high, and the ceiling, if one of those guys is out, is lower. It's not a disaster. It's not losing Christian Bryant and replacing him with Pitt Brown or whoever, but it's not ideal. And in a year when the top of the sport, that we keep talking about the top 4 teams, the bar is pretty high to clear in terms of being at the top of the sport and in terms of the expectations around this Ohio State team. So you're going to have to, you can't lose very many of your top level guys before you start getting into, you're going to beat most of the teams, but is it good enough to do what they want to do at the end of the season?
Looks like we got one more here. From Clever and Witty. Do you guys expect any other Big Ten teams on our schedule to be any good? If the only challenging games are Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan, it's going to be a boring season.
So the most Ohio State of problems. Are any of these teams that Ohio State plays in the Big Ten schedule going to be any good, or is this going to be a boring season where Ohio State just wins all their games? As far as problems you have, Tony, that's not too bad. He gave us Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan as sort of the free spaces in the bingo card. I think Iowa's going to be a challenge.
It's not going to be easy. Yeah.
Iowa's going to be a challenge. I'm not expecting them to come in and beat Ohio State, but I'm also not expecting that to be a game where Ohio State it's over in the second quarter by any means. And I think Nebraska could be a halfway decent team this year. You've got teams on the schedule. You might have those teams could both win 9 to 10 games and be in the college football playoff conversation. So that's now 5 of your 9 Big Ten games that are pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the issue with this year's Ohio State schedule is the other 4 teams on that schedule are all among the probably like 12 to 18 in the Big Ten rankings in just about everyone's version of them.
Didn't Northwestern win like 9 games last year?
They won, I think,
7?
8 or 7. Yeah.
Okay. Well, they won 9 more than they thought they should have, which because they were probably thought
-2 and 14. Yes.
But there's a world where Nebraska comes into this game this year at 7-0, ranked in the top 10, and if Ohio State beats them 52-3, is that a boring game or is that a big win over a top 10 opponent?
That feels like a game where Big Noon Kickoff comes to Columbus to talk about the unbeaten matchup of the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and then potentially if Ohio State does win by that kind of a margin, it becomes this funny footnote where you look back 2 years from now, it's like, why did they come for that game? It's like, oh, well, you got to remember, it is possible that Nebraska is unbeaten for that game and Ohio State isn't, because Ohio State has the Oregon game before that. So that is entirely possible. So I would not. I know this is the time of year when everyone's going to go undefeated and everyone's going to win every game 72-0 and never give up a first down and never punt, and that's fine. That's what this time of year is for. they're probably going to punt at some point on Saturday. They're probably going to give up a first down at some point on Saturday. They might even, Tony, heaven forbid, give up some points on Saturday. I hate to speak that into existence, but this is the time of year when you got to just enjoy the season for what the season is. Don't wish away games. You've spent the last 9 months counting the days. I have on this podcast, and I'm sure a lot of people at home have as well, down to the start of the season, counting the days to finally getting Ohio State back, finally seeing all these players on the field together for the first time in a real game. You should enjoy that. I would not hand wave any of these games, because they all you do have to keep winning, and you can't take them all, any of them for granted.
As Ryan Day said, you're only guaranteed 12.
That is true. So that will do it for us for now. If you guys enjoyed this show, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. We're going to be doing more live shows from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Wednesday. We've only done 3 live broadcasts so far today. Day's not over yet, but we will have more coming for you on Wednesday evening, more Ohio State interviews with players and coaches following practice, and then we'll probably do some kind of a live show after that as well. And then Thursday, Friday, as we're counting down the days to Saturdays, Ohio State Akron game, 3:30 on CBS. We'll be there for pregame. We'll be there for postgame. Make sure you're subscribed at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell so you get notified when we do our 100 million live shows this week. Make sure you are also subscribed to BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. Got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there, making you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.